Hello, everyone. We are here from Niagara Region's Waste Management Division to talk to you about compost, recycling, garbage, and how it affects our water. My name is Amber Schmucker. I'm the Engagement and Education Coordinator with Waste Management in Public Works, and I have a friend with me today.
Yeah, so my name is Jessie Friday. I am the Engagement and Education Intern here at Waste Management.
The Niagara Region Waste Management Team takes care of all of the green bin material and garbage that your family puts at the curb and makes sure it goes into the right place. By making sure that all of our waste ends up in the right place, we can help keep our environment healthy. Does anyone know what the word waste means? Jesse, do you know?
I'm not too sure. That's a really tough question.
Can be tough. So, waste really, if we're looking at it high level, is material that we no longer want or need and we have to get rid of. So, not all of our waste can be recycled or composted, and these non recyclable items end up in the garbage. We have to make sure that we are taking care of our waste properly so that not everything that we consider waste ends up in the landfill. What that also helps us to make sure of when we're sorting our waste properly is that it also doesn't end up in our natural environment and in lakes, rivers, streams, and most importantly, wetlands. So, what is a wetland? I'll give you a little bit of a visual. I'll take you to a fun little place. Imagine a place, if you will, where land and water come together, creating a special ecosystem that is not completely dry, but it's also not entirely underwater either. That place is called a wetland. We define wetlands as any area that holds water either temporarily or permanently. Some wetlands hold water year round. You'll always see water in them, while others hold water for 1 or 2 months each spring. Wetlands have poorly drained soil, so it's not like sand where the water gets through it very easily. It holds on to water. And they have water loving plants because of that are found in wetlands because it holds water. There's lots of water there. So the plants that are in the wetlands need to love water as well. They are almost like a halfway world between a land ecosystem and a water ecosystem. So it's not completely all fish and lily pads. There's also land and soil and trees, which we'll get to a little bit more in a minute. There are four different kinds of wetlands. So it's not just, oh, that's a wetland. It actually, a couple of them have different names. The first one I want to talk to you about is a marsh. So a marsh is a dip in the ground and that's filled with plants and open water. So it looks a little bit more like a pond. The water can be either just a few centimeters deep or a meter deep. So there's a little bit of variation in the depth in the water. Many of the plants in marshes grow with their stems partly in and partly out of the water. The second type of wetland that I want to talk to you about today are swamps. Swamps are flooded by standing or slow moving water. So it's not like a river or a stream. The water is pretty still. And there are a lot of trees and shrubs in them. The third type of wetland, which I don't think a lot of people have actually heard of. Jesse, have you heard of a fen before?
I think I've maybe heard of it before.
Okay. But it's not as common. A fen actually receives most of its water supply from groundwater, so it's water coming up from the ground and to the surface. It consists of plants like grasses, shrubs, and trees, so similar to the other two, but can look a little bit different. And the final type of wetland is a bog. So a bog is a type of wetland that is opposite from a fen. It receives most of its water supply from rainfall. And it consists of a lot of mosses and some trees. So the plants that are in these types of wetlands look a little bit different. And what is characteristic or what's special about bogs is they have much less nutrients than fens do. So I mentioned that wetlands, there's a lot of plants. We've been talking a lot about the plants that are in wetlands, but they are also home to many different types of animals. Jesse, do you know what types of animals you might find in a wetland?
I think you could find some frogs, maybe some fish, some ducks, and probably a whole bunch of different insects.
Absolutely. And also, you can actually find animals, big animals like moose as well. They love wetlands because they love to eat the plants that are in the wetland and they grow at the bottom of marshes and ponds. They'll actually dive down to the bottom to get their food, which is pretty cool. Who knew moose can swim? Wetlands are very important for so many reasons. Since they act like a sponge and hold a large amount of water, they are able to help prevent flooding. They're important for water quality as well as they have natural filters. I mentioned that they have poorly drained soil, so the water doesn't flow through them really quickly. It goes through really slow. So wetlands help to filter out excessive nutrients so things like our fertilizers that we put on plants and pollutants from the water before it reaches the water table, which is our water underground. Wetlands are even good for the economy, as some businesses depend on wetlands. Businesses like agriculture, so that's things like farming, hunting, fishing, trapping. Farmers can use the water from wetlands to help water their crops or their livestock. In the picture I have here on the screen, you can see it looks pretty cool. It's pretty elaborate, different arrows and things going everywhere. But this shows how water can get into a wetland from streams. So here we have a stream and the water is going into the wetland. From groundwater, so we see here there's groundwater and it's actually feeding up into the wetland and could also be through rain as well. So we actually in Niagara have quite a few wetlands near us. Jesse, did you know that we have wetlands in Niagara?
I actually had no idea.
We have a bunch. So some that you've maybe heard of before are places like the Wainfleet Wetland or the Wainfleet Bog, Martindale Pond, Humberstone Marsh, Jordan Harbor, and Willoughby Marsh. So that's areas all over Niagara that have wetlands. And the reason that that's so important for us to know is because we can really start to see how things like waste might affect our wetlands. And there's two main things, two main ways that waste might affect our wetlands that I want to share with you today. The first is garbage in landfills. And the reason that garbage in landfills might affect our wetlands is through something known as leachate. Here you can see a landfill, which is on top of soil and groundwater in the picture. Groundwater is water that comes from rain, snow, sleet, and hail that soaks into the ground. And groundwater sometimes is a source of drinking water, and that's one of the reasons why it's so important to keep it clean. We also use it to water crops, our things that we eat. So when it starts to rain, snow or hail, this all lands on top of the landfill and seeps through all of the waste in the landfill. So pretend that that big pile is full of different garbage that we've put in the landfill. The liquid that forms from the rain and mixes in with the garbage is called leachate. So you can see here, rain falls down, there's water in the landfill that stays there for a bit and starts to mix with what's in the landfill. The more it rains, so it rains again, the more that the landfill fills up with leachate. This is when the leachate starts to seep through the bottom of the landfill, where it does get treated and then goes back out into our environment, just like that. If the water that's going through the landfill has things in it that could harm the environment because we've incorrectly sorted our waste and we've put maybe a battery in our garbage or something like that, that can mix in with that water that into that leachate and get out into the environment. So it's very, very important that we dispose of our materials properly so that they do not end up producing that really harmful leachate that can be difficult to treat when there's really harmful chemicals in it. So when we do our part by reducing our waste and properly sorting our waste, we can actually reduce harm to the plants and animals in the ecosystems surrounding us here in Niagara. Another way that we might want to think of how waste might affect water is just by litter. Litter, whether it's thrown in accidentally or on purpose, can get into our waterways by us just living near water. And then it finds its way into wetlands. So, through, like I said, littering or illegal dumping, waste can find its way into storm sewers and storm drains and end up in our waterways. If you're not quite sure what a storm sewer is, we have some pictures here. A storm sewer is one of the grates that we have on our streets. So when it rains, the rain flows into that so we can avoid flooding on our street. And what happens is when the water flows into those drains, it collects things along the way. So sometimes you might walk by and see a bunch of leaves and maybe even some litter that's on the drain that couldn't get through, but then there's smaller pieces of litter that does get through and unfortunately can end up in our storm drains and then into our waterways. So to make sure we keep our water sources as clean as we possibly can and free of garbage, sorry, it's important that we get rid of our waste responsibly and properly and sort it into the right bins. So, with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Jesse to tell us a little bit more about what goes into the different bins.
Okay, so let's start by taking a look at our green bin. So in our green bin, we can put all of our food scraps or any materials that are made from materials that have come from the earth. So any sort of natural materials can go into our green bin. So you can put your meat, chicken, you can even put the chicken bones into your green bin. You can put fruits and fruit peels, vegetables, vegetable peels. You can put any pasta you might have left over from dinner or rice in there. And maybe you have a little house plant in your house and maybe there was a dead leaf that you cut off. That can even go in the green bin in your house. You can put your paper napkins and tissues. You can put your egg shells. And one thing that many people don't know is you can actually put your egg cartons into your green bin. And this is because egg cartons are made out of paper that's been recycled so many times that it just can't be recycled anymore. So it'll actually break down into compost with the rest of your food waste. Okay, and for the blue box, we can put a lot of our plastic and our metal and glass containers in here. So you can put milk cartons and juice boxes in the blue box. You can put your plastic packaging as well as your plastic water bottles in there. Your food and pop cans. So maybe you had a can of tuna for dinner. You can put that can in there when you're done. You can even put your frozen juice containers and your chip containers in there. So we like to call these spiral containers. And although these may look like they're made out of paper, they have a metal piece on the bottom. And that's why we can put them into the blue box because we're looking to recycle that metal piece. You can put glass jars and bottles in the blue box. You can put styrofoam in the blue box. Okay, now let's take a look at our gray box. So you can put a lot of your different paper products in here. You can put newspapers, magazines, your cardboard. Maybe you had some paper from school that you drew on. That can go in the gray box as well, but make sure that you're using both sides of your paper before you put it into the gray box. You can even put your box board in there, so like your snack boxes, those can go in the gray box. And Amber, did you know you could put plastic bags in the gray box?
Really? Why? They're plastic.
So we put plastic bags into our gray box because if we put them into our blue bin, they get all shredded up and they get cut up by the plastic items that are in there, the metal items that are in there. So if we put them in our gray box, we can easily take them out and recycle them whole instead of in little tiny pieces. Okay, and there are even some items that you can't put in the blue box, gray box, green box, or the garbage. So one of these items would be batteries. And now batteries have to go to our special drop-off locations. And there's a number of these special drop-off locations throughout the region. And you bring these items here so that they can be disposed of or recycled properly. So like we were saying, batteries from your toys or your remotes, you can bring them here. You can bring household hazardous waste, and that's a really big word, but it's just items like light bulbs. Maybe you have some old paint laying around from some arts and crafts that you were doing. You can even bring old cleaning supplies. You can bring your electronic equipment here as well. So that could be maybe some old headphones, maybe you have an old laptop or an old speaker that you don't use anymore, and these can all be brought here. Although it is important that if we do have any electronics that are still in good working condition, that we try and donate them first. Maybe you have a friend or a family member who might need them. Maybe there's a local charity that might accept those. So that way they can serve another purpose before they get recycled again. And last but not least, you can even bring your textiles. So textiles is just a big fancy word for clothing or any sort of accessories that are made out of fabric or cloth. And again, similar to our electronics, before we take these textiles to the drop-off locations, we want to think about reduce, reuse, recycle. So we have to try and reduce the amount of textiles that are going into the landfill by focusing on the importance of reusing our textiles first. So we can reuse our textiles by trying something called secondhand, which is donating them to family, friends, or even charities. And once we've tried to reduce our textiles, we can now recycle our textiles by bringing them to the drop-off locations. Even if you might have a shirt that has a hole in it, or if it has a ketchup stain on it, or even if the zipper of your jacket isn't working, you can still bring it to the special drop-off location so that we can make sure that it doesn't end up in the landfill and gets recycled properly.
Thanks so much, Jesse. That was a ton of great information and maybe a little bit hard to remember everything. So, if you need a reminder, you can actually go on our website with your parents or with maybe your teacher wants to pull up and has some questions about waste management in Niagara. You can visit niagararegion.ca/waste and get all of this information on our website. Thank you so much for being with us today and learning a little bit more about how waste or garbage, as some people call it, can affect our waterways. Have a great day.